When the enslaved woman Hurrem captured the heart of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent and rose to become his queen, she gained immense power. But with that power came a terrible burden, an ancient curse that haunted the Ottoman dynasty, the brutal struggle for the throne. Her sons were born princes, destined for greatness, but in the treacherous world of the empire, brotherhood was a fragile bond, easily broken by ambition. The law was simple and it was savage. Only one son could inherit the throne. The rest would have to die. This is the dark and captivating story of Hurrem Sultan's sons, and how a mother's desperate love for her children ignited a war that would leave an indelible scar on the heart of an empire. Within the opulent yet suffocating walls of the palace, Hurrem's children grew up surrounded by unimaginable luxury, but also by a constant chilling fear. There was the eldest, Mehmed, a gentle soul with a wise mind, destined for great things. Then came Selim, whose charm could win over any courtier, but whose love for indulgence was a known weakness. He was followed by Bayezid, the warrior prince, brave, impulsive, and adored by the soldiers. And finally, there was the youngest, Cihangir, whose frail body housed a kind and compassionate heart. Each prince was a potential sultan, a future leader of the world's most powerful empire. But the shadow of their father's throne loomed large, and only one could sit upon it. You see, in the Ottoman Empire, succession wasn't a matter of birth order. It was a matter of survival. When a sultan drew his last breath, it was a signal for his sons to draw their swords. They were expected to fight, to scheme, to betray, until only one remained standing. This horrifying tradition was known as the law of fratricide. It was a brutal, calculated custom designed to prevent the empire from fracturing into civil war by spilling the royal family's blood first, behind closed doors. It was a grim solution to an even grimmer problem. Hurrem, a master of the political game, understood this law better than anyone. She had witnessed firsthand the heartbreak and a gruesome fate of the sons of other women in the harem. She had seen princes, full of life and promise, extinguished in the name of stability. And as she held her own sons, she made a solemn vow. This would not be their fate. She would defy tradition, defy the empire, defy destiny itself to protect them. But destiny, as it often does, had its own cruel plans. Before Hurrem could secure her son's future, she had to eliminate the greatest threat to their existence. And that threat was not an invading army or a foreign king. It was right there inside the palace. Prince Mustafa, the eldest son of Sultan Suleiman, and his first consort Mahidevran, was the clear heir. He was the people's champion, brave, noble, and deeply respected by the formidable Janissary army. To the empire, he was the future. But to Hurrem, he was the obstacle that stood between her children and their very lives. In the quiet intimacy of the Sultan's chambers, she planted seeds of doubt. She whispered into Suleiman's ear, her words like honeyed poison. She spoke of the dangers of a prince growing too popular, of the whispers of rebellion among the soldiers who adored Mustafa, reminded her husband of the long history of betrayals, sons overthrowing their fathers, of empires collapsing from within. Her words, born of fear and a fierce maternal instinct, began to twist the Sultan's love for his firstborn into suspicion. The culmination of her efforts came in the year 1553, during a military campaign against Persia. Prince Mustafa, loyal and unsuspecting, was summoned to his father's royal tent. He walked in with his head held high, expecting to be honored or consulted by the Sultan. He was tragically mistaken. As he entered, the guards seized him. It was a trap, meticulously planned and ruthlessly executed. Mustafa fought bravely, but he was overwhelmed. He was strangled with a silk cord, the traditional method of execution for royals, ensuring that no royal blood was spilled onto the ground. A wave of shock and grief washed over the empire. The army, which had adored Mustafa, was stunned into silence. It said that even the most hardened soldiers wept openly for their fallen prince. From that day forward, the public's perception of Hurrem shifted forever. She was no longer just the beloved queen. She was seen as a manipulative witch who had enchanted the Sultan and orchestrated the murder of an innocent and beloved heir. But in Hurrem's mind, this wasn't murder. It was survival. She had done the unthinkable to save her own sons, at least for now.
Ow.
With Mustafa gone, the path to the throne was clear for Hurrem's children. The empire was effectively divided between them as they came of age. Selim was appointed to govern Manisa, a wealthy and peaceful province where he could cultivate his tastes for pleasure. Bazid, on the other hand, was sent to rule Kutaya, a region that mirrored his own personality, fierce, ambitious, and close to the military frontier. He quickly became a hero to his troops, but peace was not to last. The rivalry that had destroyed Mustafa soon reignited, this time between the two brothers. It was a mirror image of the conflict that had just ended, only now it was Hurrem's own blood against blood. Hurrem, a mother caught between two warring sons, was desperate to broker peace. She sent them letters filled with loving words and stern warnings. She dispatched gifts to soothe their egos and tears to appeal to their sense of family. She tried with all her might to mend the growing rift between them. But as she grew older and her health began to fail, her legendary control over the palace, the Sultan, and her own family began to slip through her fingers like sand. The fire she had started was now threatening to consume her own house. In 1558, Hurrem Sultan died. The palace officially mourned the loss of its powerful queen, but behind the veil of sorrow, there was an unspoken sigh of relief. The one person holding the fragile piece together was gone, without their mother's powerful influence to protect and guide them. Selim and Bayezid stood alone, facing each other as rivals for the ultimate prize. The power vacuum left by Hurrem's death quickly pulled the brothers into open conflict. Selim, who became known as Selim the Blonde and later, less flatteringly, Selim the Drunk for his love of wine, shrewdly used his proximity to the capital to gain his father's favor. Bayezid, ever the fiery and defiant warrior, saw this as a betrayal. Believing his father had unfairly chosen his brother, he did the unthinkable. He rebelled. Bayezid marched his army towards the capital, turning a family feud into a full-blown civil war. Father was now pitted against son and brother against brother. The battlefields of the Ottoman Empire were soaked with the blood of its own people, a war born from one woman's desperate love. In the end, Bayezid's rebellion failed. He was defeated, captured, and following the grim tradition, strangled along with his own sons. The path was now completely clear. Selim ascended to the throne as Sultan Selim II. The dynasty of Hurrem had survived, just as she had always wanted. But it was a hollow victory, achieved at the cost of its own soul. The family was shattered, and the empire was left to be ruled by the lone survivor of a brutal family conflict. The story of Hurrem Sultan is not a fairy tale. It is a raw and powerful testament to survival, ambition, and the heart-wrenching tragedies that can accompany great power. She rose from the depths of slavery to become one of the most influential women in history. She loved her husband deeply, ruled beside him wisely, and fought with every ounce of her being for her children. But in the ruthless world she helped to shape, every victory demanded a price, and that price was almost always paid in blood. Her legacy, however, endured. It lived on through the reign of her son, Suleiman II, and perhaps more importantly, it ushered in an era known as the Sultanate of Women, wherefore, over a century, powerful imperial women would follow in her footsteps, wielding influence from within the harem. Even today, if you walk through the grand halls and shadowed corridors of Topkapi Palace, you might feel it the lingering echo of her voice, a whisper caught between gold and shadow. A mother, a queen, a woman who changed an empire, but who ultimately lost a part of herself to protect it. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next deep dive into history's most compelling tales. We'll see you in the next video.